config. Config is a complex command, but it's a pretty useful one. Let's check the help as we did before with other commands. I'm making this window bigger because this command help is really big. Where it is config? Here we have config. Show sets configuration. Okay. So as you can see, we have a lot of modifiers for this command. We can just turn config to the defaults by adding this modifier. We can change mode between SD card or network mode. It's the same that you do when you do the onboarding process and you say via your mobile phone, I want to configure this with Wi-Fi or with SD card. So it starts logging data and the LED will be pink or blue. Publication interval. I'm going to go into this later. Read interval. Wi-Fi. When you configure your kit in network mode, it's mandatory that you provide a Wi-Fi with SSID and password. Password is optional because if you are connecting to an open network, then you don't need to type the password. And token. The token is also mandatory when you are in network mode, because if the kit doesn't know a token, the platform won't recognize the data it is receiving. Okay, so let's try to do some stuff with this command. If I just type config, you will see the current state of configuration. Not configured because we are not yet in network mode or SD card mode, because we haven't done the onboarding or anything on this kit yet. The intervals are the default intervals. The credentials for Wi-Fi doesn't exist, and there's no token. Here we can see the MAC address is the same one that we saw in the version command. If you remember, this is the same data, but in this case we show it in the config command because it's pretty common that we want to connect to the kit when we are in setup mode. So here you can have a shortcut to check which are the last 4 letters of your MAC address. So imagine that we want to configure this kit to the default values. Imagine it's already configured and we want to take it to default. So I just type config -defaults, right? So as you can see, after this line, he prints the new configuration. In this case, it's the same because we weren't configured before, and send us this message. Please reset your kit. After setting the values to default, it's pretty important to reset your kit so those values are loaded into memory and are used since the beginning. Okay. In our case, it's not important because we were already there. Now, let's try to configure our kit to the simplest possible configuration, meaning SD card. In SD card mode, we don't need to configure a Wi-Fi or anything else. So, sorry. Config -mode and which mode we want. We can type SD card or SD as a shortcut. As you can see, my kit now turns pink and starts logging data. We can see on the output that starts reading the sensors and suddenly it stops and says, hey, I cannot find an SD card because I don't have an SD card on this kit. Let me put one on it. So I am inserting the SD card, and you can see on the console that the kit realized that the SD card was inserted, and it says it's ready to use and removes the warning blinking on the LED because he is now ready to keep logging data. Okay, In the next interval for readings, he will print again this loop and will save the data to the SD card. Now, intervals. We have to start talking about intervals. Intervals, it's something that we need to understand properly to be able to use them, but it's a pretty powerful feature of the kit. So we have several different intervals that we can configure by separated, but each of those have a different functionality. The simplest to understand is what we call the publish interval. This is how often the kit will try to publish data to the network. For example, if we are reading sensors every minute, we can set the publish interval to 10 minutes. So the kit will take 10 readings, and once 10 minutes have passed, he will publish those 10 readings in one connection. This option, normally, as a default, you can see it up here, is 180 seconds. Meaning that the kit will publish every 3 minutes. This helps us save power because Wi-Fi connections and turning on the Wi-Fi chip and connecting to a Wi-Fi takes power from the kit. So when we are in battery applications, it's a nice feature because we can publish only once per hour, once per half an hour, and don't spend that much energy in the Wi-Fi. If we are connected to a power source that's not a battery, like via USB or the mains, then this is not really important. We can publish as often as we want because the power consumption is not, we don't need to reduce it as much. So this publish interval is not related to the amount of data we got. It's just related to how often we send that data to the platform. If we are checking the platform very often, or we want the data to be there on real time, we can keep this in the same size as the reading interval. So each time the sensor takes a reading, he will publish it to the platform. But we can make it bigger. It cannot be smaller than the reading interval because obviously we cannot publish anything that doesn't exist yet. The second concept is the reading interval. Okay, this is like, we call it the reading loop. The sensor works like in loops. So if this loop is 60 seconds long, every 60 seconds, the kit will check for each sensor. And if it's time to read that sensor, it will take a reading and store it. Once he finishes, if it's time to publish, he will publish all that data. Some loops or some reading intervals, some sensors are not meant to be read. What I'm trying to say is you can configure each sensor to be read on every reading interval or just every 2 or every 10 reading intervals, because some sensors you don't want to read them as often as others. As default, for example, the PM sensors are configured to be read less often than the rest of the sensors because they consume more power. So we just read it every 3 reading intervals. So until now we have seen 2 main concepts: publish interval, that's pretty easy, and reading interval. Reading interval, again, is just when the kit checks what do I need to read, okay? And the third concept is the sensor interval. We configure that, if you remember this slide about the sensor command, we configure that setting with the sensor command. Let me fire it up again here. Okay, so as you can see, when I type the sensor command, he will tell me how often I'm going to read this sensor. Every 1 interval, or every 2 or every 3 intervals. And he tells me how much seconds that is. Obviously, the amount of seconds varies if the reading interval changes, because if the loop is longer and I read it every 1 interval, the sensor reading is also longer. So for example, if I have a 1 minute, 60 second reading interval, and my sensors are going to be read every one interval is 60 seconds. If I change this, let's do it for humidity. Sensor, the kit is outputting stuff. I'm going to make a parenthesis here to tell you a small tip. There is a command called shell. And if I put dash on, shell on, my kit will turn yellow and he will stop doing whatever he was doing, so I can type commands without being interrupted by the output of a normal reading. Okay, so now I can come back to work without being interrupted. And at any time, I can just type shell off and the kit will go back to the normal loop. So, sensor, let's change humidity. So, humidity and the dash read int, if I remember well. And then let's say, for example, 180 seconds. Okay. I think I didn't do it well. Let's check it. Sensor command. No, it didn't change. So let's check help. Sensor interval is not read int, it's just interval. I was confused because in config it's read int. Okay, I didn't remember properly. So let's do it again. Sensor humidity and minus interval 180. Changing interval of humidity to 180. And now if I check my sensor list with the sensor command, I can see that humidity is going to be read every 3 intervals. So the kit rounds the number that we asked to him to the most close loop that he found to that period of time. So since 180 seconds is 3 times the loop interval, the reading interval, he chooses 3. Okay. And now if I change the read interval, this will also adapt to that. For example, config minus read int. And instead of 60 seconds, I want each reading to be taken every 90 seconds. Okay. And if now I do the sensor command, you can see all the numbers have changed to multiply 90 by the amount of intervals. Okay, I hope that the interval idea is clear enough, and we shall move to the next command. We already checked read and monitor, config. Let's configure our kit to the default value. Let's reset our kit manually, or we can do it even on the console. So we verify that that command also works. And as you can see, my window is great. So it's not connected to the kit because the kit is resetting. So I need to reselect the port and reopen my window. Since the PM sensor is not connected, you can see the messages that he failed enabling them. Now the kit is again in red in setup mode. And if I type sensor, I should see my sensors there. All of them are enabled again. So let's just try to configure via command or kit to be connected to a network. So I do a config. I do dash mode network. I can just use net for short. I need to set a token. I'm going to use anything for now. And I do need to set a Wi-Fi SSID and password. The SSID should be between quotes and different, after a space, the password should be also inside quotes. So I have here a Wi-Fi that's called sensors network. And then my password is, okay. I hope I'm not missing anything. I just type enter. I'm gonna make it bigger so you can see the output. And now you can see new config, network. The intervals are the same. The Wi-Fi is there, the token, and he starts saying messages. I'm gonna stop out to scroll so we can read them. ESP finished booting, connected to Wi-Fi. He syncs the time with the internet. He gets a new time from the internet. So he syncs his RTC, his real-time clock, says hello to the platform. Everything is okay. Info sent. He sends his information to the platform and his versions and hardware information. And then he starts getting readings and publishing. Okay. So we can see here for this timestamp, 8 readings has been saved to SD card and after that sent to the platform. And it was a success. The readings should be in the platform by now. Okay. So it was pretty easy to configure here without doing anything with the phone, with anything else. The only difference is that if we don't do the onboarding, we cannot get a new token. So this works when you already have a token or you have a set of tokens that you set up before on the platform. All of those settings that I just execute in this command can be set one by one. So if, for example, you just move your kit to a different place and you just want to change the Wi-Fi, you can just do something like this, no? Config -Wi-Fi and the new Wi-Fi. That's useful when you move kits or you just want to change tokens so they start publishing in different devices, stuff like that. Okay, let's move on to the next command. Control. This is a little bit more advanced command because it depends on the sensor itself. Each sensor can, but not always, have some stuff that you can control, some calibration data, some settings of the sensor, how often he updates internally, stuff like that. So with this command, we can access that features of specific sensors. In the default sensors from the Smart Citizen Kit, there is nothing that we normally touch with this command. But for custom sensors, for example, all the probes that are used in water sensors that needs calibration, that we're going to see that on the next webinar, we do use this command for that, okay? So we're going to see it on detail on calibration webinar. There's a lot more commands. You can see it on the help. For example, hello, you saw that when the kid just connected to the platform, he sent a hello message to say to the platform, I'm alive. So you can send it manually. You can check the bus to find different sensors that are not detected. You can configure power. For example, how much time passes before the kid goes to sleep. You can enable debug messages, so you get a lot more information about the lower level problems inside the kit. You can change servers, so if you want to publish to a different server, you can just change MQTT server or NTP server to get the time from different server. There is a lot of commands that go deeper into the kit, and maybe in a different webinar we can go deeper into some of them.